So a couple weeks ago, you might remember that I had this idea about Topps potentially doing some sort of buyback program with Wander Franco cards and Wander Franco autographs. And although they didn't do that specifically, they did do something that I think is very smart of them and that I really like. So they sent out some emails to customers, and they gave them three options for some Wander Franco redemptions that they were currently waiting on, probably because he hadn't signed or something. So customers had sent in Wander Franco redemptions, and like I said, probably hadn't signed them, which is why they're getting this email, because if he had signed them, then they probably would have got the card back. But they gave him three options. So they said, continue to wait until more information is available. They said, we'll issue a substitution valued at 2 to 4x the current market value of your Wander Franco redemption, which I'm actually, now that I'm saying that out loud, I'm wondering how they would determine that, if there's certain cards that maybe he did sign some of them and he didn't sign others, and that's why there's a redemption, or maybe it's just that honestly somebody sent in their redemption and they do have the cards, and they just don't want to send out the Wander Franco autos. Or option number three is, we will issue a Topps.com store credit, again 2 to 4x the current market value of the Wander Franco redemption. I think this is a good move. I think it'll be interesting to see if this is something that they do in the future with other cards. I do think that unfortunately, I think this Wander Franco situation is so volatile and unique in the sense that, like, Wander Franco he was the number one prospect for I mean, he was the number one prospect in baseball for like 4 years, it seemed like, from like 2018 until like he got to the majors in 2020, 2021-ish. So there's probably he had a ton of cards and a ton of autos that were probably planned. Like, he was the type of player where he was just going to be in every set, similar to like a Trout, or similar to like a Mookie Betts, where it's like they want to get those players in every single set, any type of autograph or insert set. So Topps, I mean, and then they also said in this email, 7 to 10 business days with your preferred choice, which, that's, I think, a big thing where within sports cards there's been issues in the past where the timeline of certain things has not been defined. I think, like, grading, I think, is a perfect example. I mean, redemptions, I think, is another very good example. So the fact that Topps and Fanatics are coming out and saying, within 7 to 10 business days, whichever of these options that you choose, that's what you're going to be getting within the 7 to 10 business days. I think it's a phenomenal move by Topps. I think it's very smart of them to maybe try and not have to send out some of these Wander Franco autographs, because it really, like I said, the situation, the more information that's coming out, it just seems like it's getting worse and worse, like, with like what actually potentially happened. And then, and I don't know, it's such an unfortunate situation. There's victims in this situation, so it's not something where, I don't know. I mean, I haven't really seen anybody joking about it on Twitter, so that's obviously, I think, been really good. At least not from this standpoint. I think I've seen other jokes about it with, I don't know, other random things. But I think it's also big of Topps to come in and make this decision, because, like I said, the concept that I was thinking of was doing a buyback, which this in some senses is. They are, and I think they wouldn't be able to do a full buyback of all the Wander Franco cards, but I think them trying to bring value to collectors who have these redemptions, and give them a way to get their money back, basically, and even get 2 to 4x their money. Like, that seems like a no-brainer. Like, sure, maybe, I don't know exactly how they'll do the other type of redemption. Like, I think option 2 was like get a substitute card. if I had to guess, that's probably going to be um, expired redemptions that they might have. Maybe that's maybe how they'll do the 2 to 4x, because it's like they can't like get more redemptions autos, or they can't get. I mean, or maybe they just have these types of autos prepared potentially. Like I don't know the back end of for Topps in this situation, like how they would determine what 2 to 4x a substitution card for redemption would be. They must have some cards, or they must have maybe, like I said, some expired redemption autos that potentially they could look at a market value and say, well, whatever auto that this Wander Franco card was going to be, 2 to 4x. I mean, I would say it's probably going to be better to, I don't know, because I think the 2 to 4x is obviously very generous, but I think with what's happened with Wander Franco, his cards you're really plummeting so significantly that 2 to 4x. I mean, it's almost tough sometimes to look at those prices and be like, well, 2 to 4x, like 2 to 4x of what? Like 2 to 4x of $5? Like, and that's obviously a little bit of an exaggeration when it comes to like what the pricing of the cards are. But it is also interesting that even the cards are selling at all. I mean, I don't know who is buying and selling them. I mean, I guess it's not a story, like it's a breaking story that probably happened when it happened on ESPN, but they're not talking about it every single day because there isn't really new information every single day. So it's maybe if you're not on social media and you're not within card social media, maybe I don't know, maybe you don't know, maybe you don't know potentially, like that really would be odd, but maybe you don't know. But I do, like I said, I do think it's a great move here by Topps to step in and say, we understand what's going on with this player, and we want to come back and we want to give people value for cards that potentially may not be worth that much. We want to come back and we want to give you either a substitute card, or we're going to give you some sort of store credit so you can buy something else from this redemption that you just sent in. The 1/1 Bronny James Superfractor Auto that just came out of this year's Bowman Basketball was recently listed on eBay, and I feel like it's one of the first times that I can think of in a while that a card like that has been listed on eBay. Like it feels like it almost feels like any time a big card like that is pulled or it's opened, that it goes right to Golden, or it goes right to PWCC. Or it goes right to grading. Like, it's a raw card, too. Like, this is sort of the other thing. And I think I don't know, remember the last time that I talked about this, but it's sort of just making me think, like, are there maybe too many marketplaces for cards? And that's, I mean, it's really, I think it's subjective, obviously. Do I think that it has hurt the price of cards? I think any big cards that have gone to Golden or PWCC, they do a pretty good job at marketing those cards and making sure that people are aware that the cards are being sold. There has been a couple cards recently, like I believe the Babe Ruth card, that I think it's sold through, it was either, I think it might have been Robert Edward Auctions, or it was some auction house that like people were saying was going to break the record, and then it didn't even like come close, really. Like it didn't, like it was way off the projected value of the card, which I feel like that's almost a whole nother topic for discussion here. Like, should the valuation of cards, I think, is such a dangerous, slippery slope, because who's to say what a card should sell for? Yes, I think that there is metrics and there are formulas that you could put together that says, well, if a certain card sells for a certain amount, and this is the metric that I usually do for lower numbered cards and what I think they should sell for. And I use Mike Trout and Bryce Harper for an example. If you look at their rookie cards, the prices of their rookie cards, and then you look at if a card for Mike Trout sold for a certain price. And this is based on something that I told someone, I think. They had a Bryce Harper card, and they didn't know what the price of it was. So I said, here's the formula you should do to try to figure out the price. Now, we do see big accounts talking about on Twitter and Instagram about what cards could sell for and what they should sell for. And if those numbers are coming from the auction houses, like that's definitely not, like that should definitely be something that shouldn't be happening. I think that it probably is, if I'm going to be completely honest, because I think the auction houses, what do they really have to lose when it comes to saying that a card should sell for a certain price? Like, if they're evaluating it, I guess really the only thing that you could think of is, like, I don't know, if somebody somehow like took out insurance based on the valuation, and then it doesn't sell for that much, and then they can claim the insurance. That would really be the only thing. And I don't even know if you could do that. That's just something that I thought of off the top of my head of what could lead to something happening if an auction house or people are saying a certain card should sell for a certain amount. So this Bronny card is listed on eBay. Like I said, it's one of the first times I can really remember in quite some time where a card that's, I mean, you could argue that's not really that big of a deal. Like, Bronny hasn't been playing that well this year. I also think we maybe should give him a little bit of slack here. Like, he did also have, like, you know, I think over the summer he, like, his heart stopped when he was playing. So, you know, he's probably still recovering from that. I would definitely say he's definitely still recovering from that. So I don't know. I think the only thing that really hurts him more in this scenario is, like, does he go to the league next year or the year after that? Because there's no way that Bronny goes to the draft and doesn't get drafted, and then LeBron doesn't go to that team. I just don't see how that could happen. So maybe you could say, if that happens, like, what happens to a card like this? Like, this is probably going to be his best card, like, you know, in terms of, if we're looking at from Bowman and baseball perspective, the Superfractor 1/1 of Bowman autograph is the biggest card for players. Now, obviously it's a college card, but I think this, and I know I've said this for sure, like, this iteration of college cards is going to change the way that people, it's not going to change the way people think about college cards, because these college cards are so much different than the ones that Panini comes out with. Like, the Bowman cards of players who are still playing in college, and for Victor Wembanyama over in France at the time, it's so much of a bigger deal, the fact that they have these autos coming out, or these cards coming out while they're probably still playing on the team. So, like I said, the other question that I have here is, like, why, like, I wonder why this person didn't send the card to Golden or anything. Ultimately, like, that would be the one question that I would really be interested in, because, like I said, this is a pretty big card, and it feels like the one thing that I think Golden and PWCC have done an okay job at is, with a card like this, making the process of sending it into them, getting it graded, getting it sold, getting the money, them shipping the card out, and you not having to worry about what happens to the card after it gets shipped out. It feels like there's a lot of benefits, but I guess I'm not 100% sure of, like, you know, fees, and maybe there is certain things that, like, you look at and say, well, I'll just do all of this and I'll take the risk and I'll figure it out, or whatever I'm going to do. You know, maybe it could be something where it's like, I think the card is listed for $100,000 or best offer. It could be that, like, the person is going to turn that $100,000. They're just going to fly the card. Like, that could be the scenario. Like, I almost, that's kind of an interesting concept as well. Like, if Golden or PWCC or any of the big auction houses, now I think we're playing with fire a little bit, because that would be interesting if they were to figure out how to book an experience around the sale of the card. Like, say the card sells for $100,000, and they're just like, but what we'll do is we'll work with a travel agency, we'll work with some people, and we will book you a $10,000 or $20,000 vacation where you go, and you go with maybe somebody from Golden or one of these auction houses. You go and you give the person the card. There's some sort of authentication process where the person can't be like, no, I didn't get the card. And then you either, I mean, depending on where the card is going, you could either stay there, or they ship you out, or they send you out to some other location. But it has to do with all, like, they set up everything. Like, they set up, you know, the booking and all of those things. Now, that's pretty wild, and I do not see that happening. But, you know, when it comes to sports cards nowadays, we're seeing sales of these millions and these $100,000 cards sell. I think it would be kind of cool if, you know, Topps or Fanatics or Panini probably wouldn't do this, but if or one of the auction houses were to start including maybe more experiences. Like we have seen with that Victor Wembanyama green auto, like they did have an event where people came out. I'm not 100% sure if it was full expenses. I feel like it might have been. I don't remember off the top of my head if it was or not. But either way, I think if one of these companies were to step in and do that, that would be a really cool innovation to the marketplace that we definitely have never seen. A few weeks ago, you probably heard the episode where I was talking about the original Pokemon card game had its 25th anniversary of the original booster pack release, and one of the other trading card games that I was talking about was MetaZoo. And I was talking about how I thought it was kind of cool. I thought it was, I don't think it was really ever going to be able to rival Pokemon, but maybe in the trading card game space, there could be some potential for like a competitor like MetaZoo, or a competitor like the MetaZoo game. Well, now apparently it seems that the MetaZoo is actually shutting down. I don't know exactly the reason. It seems like the type of thing where if it's a TGC, like what's the point of really shutting the operations down? I mean, I get maybe if they don't come out with any more. I'm guessing obviously it's a funding situation where they don't have the money to fund certain things that they want to do within the game. But I don't know. It just seems like what's the point of, like, because they erased their Twitter. I don't know if they erased their Instagram, but when I was looking into this a little bit, their Twitter has now been deactivated. They put out like a press release that they're going to be shutting down. And I mean, I guess I'm sort of surprised. I mean, like I said, it wasn't necessarily a trading card game that I followed super closely. It was one that was on my radar because it was, Steve Aoki was one of kind of the people who was sort of championing this game. And so he was kind of one of the people in charge of maybe not really creating, but he was like one of the ambassadors. I know Sports Card Investor talked about it for a little bit, and sometimes things go the way they do when there's times in the industry where certain things just don't go the right way. And I think that's sort of the point of what I want to talk about on this episode. And over the next few years, what we're probably going to be seeing is just a lot of change and a lot of things that maybe people didn't expect, and a lot of things that, like I said, I don't know exactly, I guess what happened with MetaZoo, for example, is the reason why it couldn't be Pokemon necessarily is because Pokemon had a video game built into it, so then Pokemon could come out with the new video game with new characters. Which an interesting thing about that is with the video game, there's actually a new Pokemon game that's it's not Pokemon, but it's called Pal World. I'm not sure if anyone's heard of this, but basically it's Pokemon, but you can shoot the Pokemon out of grenade launchers, and you can have them build houses, and you can have them go and hunt for supplies and stuff like that. And the names of the characters in the game are not the Pokemon names, but they're basically almost one-to-one ripoffs of what the Pokemon look like. So, like I said, for the games, there was a reason why Pokemon could come out with new characters and they come out with new games, even though, if we're going to be completely honest, Pokemon has not really innovated the games since the original release. Sure, they've come out with better graphics and a little bit of a different story, and battling's a little bit different, but basically from A to Z, for the most part, you're doing kind of the same stuff. But for Pokemon, they were able to come out with these different characters, able to come out with these new things, they were able to come out with new sets, which I don't really know if people collected the cards of the newer Pokemon necessarily. The people really focused on the collection of the older characters versus the newer characters. And with MetaZoo, I don't know if necessarily they could have come out with some other type of thing, or if they would have been able to even really crack into the dent, I guess. I mean, now that I'm looking at it, I don't think it's obvious that MetaZoo was going to shut down, because like I said, if it's a TGC game, what's stopping them from doing some sort of, I don't know, tournaments, or coming out with doing something that involves the games themselves, so that way, the cards become collectible. And that's the one big thing with Pokemon, was the cards became collectible because people were using the cards, which made higher graded versions of the cards harder to find because people were just using the cards in the game. They weren't worried about grading them. And I think with MetaZoo, it was almost the opposite. And I think over the past couple years, we've seen that within sports cards. When something is created when something is, or at least maybe not we've seen it within sports cards, but I think this is something like, I watched an interesting documentary about Pez. Like if you go to Netflix, there's an interesting documentary about Pez. And the thing is, it's very similar with cards. It's like people collected these things, but they weren't made to be collected, but there are people who collected ones that were being made, if that makes sense. And I think that's what sort of happened within sports cards over the past few years is these cards were almost, they were being produced, or these new types of cards were being produced to be collected and not used, which I think in a way it should be the opposite where, like, you know, I guess Hess trucks might be another example. I mean, anything collectible, you really look at it. I think anything collectible, anything that's collectible or anything that was created to be collectible over the past few years really maintained a lot of the value because people were collecting it after the fact. They weren't buying these things to, and maybe it's the same with sports cards, like boxes. I think that's maybe a good example. Like sports card boxes never really had been purchased to hold on to or to collect. They were purchased to be opened. Now, I think you could look at the marketplace now and say, well, there's so many card boxes that it almost doesn't really matter. It almost doesn't matter how many boxes you hold or how many boxes you have. Like, there's just so many of them that it's like the collectability, and maybe it might be high-end boxes. Maybe it's going to be lower-end boxes. But I do also think the other thing I thought was interesting was I saw a lot of people, like, you know, poo-pooing MetaZoo and being like, oh, see, everybody knew it was going to fail or all of these things. It's like, I don't know how people have this mentality or why they live their lives like this, because it's like, it just feels like it's so exhausting to like root for something to fail all the time and being like happy when something fails, which, sure, you can be happy that it failed. I don't really care one way or the other. But the people who were buying boxes of like maybe the original booster box sets, like who knows 10, 20 years from now, maybe this does end up being a game that people want to play. Like, I haven't necessarily looked into the game itself, but in, you know, however many years, maybe there will be MetaZoo tournaments. And, you know, I know like the Mothman, and because a lot of the characters within the MetaZoo, are all like folklore. So they're all sort of known-ish in a way, like not like, you know, super well-known folklore, but there is like a couple that are like, you know, I think there's like Buffalo Bill is in there, or the Blue Buffalo. I think there's like a couple different ones that are pretty big, but it's like, sure, this failed, but it's like now they're not going to make any more of this product, and it's like, I just wonder what ends up happening to the original the original boxes 10, 20 years from now, if hypothetically this game does ever come back. You know, we probably have seen games that didn't really work. I mean, just off the top of my head, I mean, Digimon, that was a game, that was a show that had a game that the cards didn't really come back, and I don't think that many people really play it. But I just think it's an example of what can happen to games. Like, if in 10, 20 years from now, MetaZoo does come back, there's potential that those cards that people were buying back then do have some value. I think right now, unfortunately, I don't know exactly what's going to happen because, like I said, if the company is shutting down, clearly there wasn't enough momentum to keep it open, because we've seen tons of companies just hemorrhage money to stay open, and the fact that they're just so willing to so quickly shut this down, especially the fact that, like, Topps is making some of their cards, the fact that Topps wasn't even willing to bring it on as like a client or like an entity within their business. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure why they would do it that way, but unfortunately it is closed. But I guess we'll see. I don't know. Maybe this is a marketing thing. Maybe they're coming out and they're deleting all their social medias just for them to be like, actually, we saw what everybody said. We're just kidding, and we're going to be back. I guess we really, only time will tell, and we're not sure what's going to happen right now. I saw this story developing probably like a week or two ago. I know Ryan Cracknell, I think he works for Beckett, or he used to work for Beckett. He's a great follow. I think he does work for Beckett, because I think he posts a lot of the like team set stuff on Beckett. But he's a great follow. Trader Cracks on Twitter. Definitely go check him out. I mean, he posts a lot of phenomenal information. He posted that someone had noticed. I don't know if someone had contacted him or if he had noticed or if what exactly it was. But somebody had noticed that the UFC had been taken off of Panini's website, and they're like logos of all the companies that they have licenses for. Now, I saw this and I was going to comment on it, but I didn't really have enough information to really do a whole podcast on, because it would have just been a podcast of speculation, realistically. It really wouldn't have been a podcast with any hard facts. But now we have some hard facts. So Topps has officially gotten the UFC license back, and they've announced that they're going to be coming out with a UFC product in February, which is it's very strange to me that all this is happening so quickly, because, like I said, as we know within sports cards, we know how long most of these products take, usually. I think we have definitely seen the timeline decrease in terms of runtime of how quickly we need. And also, it's UFC, so it may not be as large a print run. Like, if we're talking Top Series 1 or Top Series 2, there's probably a decent lead time they need on when they're going to get players into that. UFC, the print run's obviously not going to be as high. There's only going to be one, real set of products that's coming out for that one. There's not going to be, they might come out with some sort of different kind of set for it, potentially, like a different type of chrome for it, potentially, I suppose. But Topps is now going to be switching over. Now, UFC and WWE have both flip-flopped between Topps and Panini over the past few years. As you remember, I think the Conor McGregor rookie is a Topps card. And then I don't know if it was Topps and Panini came out with it, but then Panini got the license. And then, you may remember this probably, I don't know, this might have been September or October. UFC and the WWE merged into one group. Like, they merged into a single company. So, like, does this mean that WWE is also going to be going back to Topps soon? Like, I would imagine there's probably, I can't imagine the licensing department is like a massive group before both companies. Like, they probably, obviously, they are, the IP and the licensing are going to be probably run by two different groups of people. Like, they're not going to be run by the same group, even though they are under, I think it's TKO Entertainment, I think is the name of their, the parent company that was recently, that recently merged the two companies together. Which, also another interesting story that came out was The Rock. He now owns he owns the Rock licensing, or the IP, or whatever exactly it was. So Dwayne Johnson, which you may remember, again, these are WWE, and there's a lot of, oh, you may remember this, you remember this, but the Leaf had a bunch of WWE wrestling cards come out, probably, like, again, a couple months ago, and they said they signed Dwayne Johnson to an exclusive contract. Now, that was a little bit of speculation. Back then, I was like, well, is The Rock and Dwayne Johnson, are those two different intellectual properties? I think they probably still are. Like, and I think the autos were Dwayne Johnson. I don't think they were The Rock autographs. So, I don't know if he signs them differently, like if he's signing as The Rock or if he's signing as Dwayne Johnson. Probably, I would say potentially. But just looking at it, now that TKO Entertainment Group owns WWE and UFC, and now that UFC is going over to Topps, I don't know. I don't know how much longer Panini is going to own that license. And I really am wondering, like, if it was this easy to get licenses, like, why were there no other companies trying to get licenses like this in the past? This is the thing I sort of am a little bit confused by, if I'm going to be completely honest, with, like I always thought that if they have the license, they have the license for X amount of years, there's nothing you can do about it. But it clearly seems that somewhere in some contract, or somehow in some way, Fanatics is just coming in and being like, no, we want that license is going to be ours, we're going to, like, I don't know if it's a buyout, like because within soccer, and this actually happens within esports as well, like, if a player, and I know that I'm going to try and make this make sense, because I know the analogy that I'm going to use, and I know that it makes sense. I'm going to try and make sure I explain it like it makes sense. So if a player is owned by a team, they can then, sell that player to a different team for a certain buyout amount. So I'm wondering if, in this scenario, if the license is the player within soccer and esports, if the license is the player, like, are these companies selling these licenses? Like, and if that's the case, if I'm Fanatics, like, I'm, I don't know, I'm maybe potentially looking into trying to do this a little bit more. Now, Fanatics, I think, is definitely trying to get all the licenses, if I'm going to be honest. So maybe they're not even interested in selling any of these licenses, like, because, again, like, the 10xing of the hobby, I think Fanatics is more or less trying to 10x Fanatics. Like, I don't necessarily think, like, I think we're reading into what they're saying a little bit too non-specifically, if I'm going to be honest. I think Fanatics, sure, they're trying to grow the sports card business, but I think they're trying to more or less grow Fanatics. Like, if they can grow Fanatics 10x because of sports cards, I think that's what they're going to try and do. Now, I honestly don't think they're close to that. And also, if you're on the internet and you follow internet marketing people, the 10x is kind of like a meme, honestly. Like, something is going to 10x. That's like, it may be us looking into this more specifically and saying, oh, 10x, they're actually going to 10 times the amount of whatever in the hobby. It's sort of a meme. It's maybe like a business thing where they're just saying they're going to 10x the hobby, or they're going to 10x Fanatics. I don't really know exactly what they meant specifically. It is a very vague term. So, like, the vagueness of it leaves it up to interpretation for them. It leaves it up to interpretation for us as content creators, or us just people in the hobby in general. But I think Fanatics really has just come in and totally changed. Obviously, they've changed sports cards and they've changed the industry. But I think they have changed it in a way that we didn't really expect, if I'm going to be completely honest. Like, because I didn't, like I said, when companies got these licenses, I thought it was just, they have the license, it is what it is. Panini is going to have all the licenses for basketball and football for forever. Fanatics is going to have baseball or whatever they try and get, and that's going to be it. Clearly, that's not the case, because clearly Fanatics has come in and said, no, we're actually going to try to do whatever the best business move is for Fanatics. And in this scenario, it's getting this UFC license that could be potentially tied to WWE. We're not really sure yet, but the license right now, it's a UFC license, and they're going to be coming out with a product in, like I said, just a couple months. Like, in a month, not even just a couple months, in like a month or a couple weeks. So there was, with this story, I guess I have a couple different thoughts about what happened with SGC this week. So, if you didn't see, I guess SGC originally had graded, they had graded one of the LeBron exquisite RPAs, which very quickly made its way over to Twitter, and people pointed out, within a couple days, because I think SGC must have, I don't know, I guess they must have, I think that they had posted it, and then people quickly were like, the patch is not the same. The patch was, I guess the exquisite card was under a list of other exquisite cards, or, because Blowout has like a kind of a big forum of cards that they've seen that have been altered, that have sort of been still in the market. And SGC, like I said, they posted the picture, then people within Twitter, within the Blowout forums, they commented. They were like, "Hey, what's going on with this card? Like, it's known to be altered. It's known to be a card that has been changed, and which is the patch. The patch within the card has been changed. I don't even understand how they do that. Like, how do you?" Like, which I guess honestly, maybe that's a good thing that I don't know how to. Not that something that I would ever do, but it's like, because you look at the card and it looks fine. Like, I don't know how they would get the patch in there. Like, because basically the alteration of the card is that they changed the patch, and obviously that's terrible. That's bad. I don't condone ever doing that. And I have a couple different thoughts here. Like, one is we need. Which I think SGC did a good job here, if I'm going to be completely honest. Like, one thing that we definitely need is the industry experts, which, I consider us, I consider us in this category of people who need to do better at conveying information and doing more research, because I think this industry, sports cards in general, and the hobby, I guess, overall, is there's so much information, there's so much, I think that, there's so much new information, I think, within this hobby that needs to be completely transparent. Like here's what I think. I think 100% transparency within the hobby is important, because there is so much fraudulent activity and behavior that occurs within this industry, unfortunately, that if you aren't 100% transparent about what you're trying to do or what is being done, it makes you look bad. And with SGC here, they like I said, they posted the picture. They said, "Wow, the car looks great. It's great," and all these things. But then they came out and they said that they're like, "Oh, we realized that this is an issue. Like we saw what everyone was saying, and they put out a whole new statement. They said, you all know as well as us by now, understanding how much we love and support in the hobby as a whole. We take immense pride in what we do," and this is the end of the statement, "and no one appreciates the responsibility of safe grading in the hobby more than we do. While this may be a difficult one for our team to move past, we take solace in the fact that this card has now been assessed accurately." So they changed the grade of the card. If I had to guess, that's also shout out to the collector, whoever sent this back in, because, I don't know, again, there's so many different layers to this story that shout out to the collector who sent the card back in. It's got an authentic altered grade on it. So it's like, what do you really do with this card now? Like what ends up happening? It's a pretty wild story, but like, shout out to the collector who sent the card back in, who saw what happened. Maybe I hope that they get some sort of money back, I guess. I don't know if they like bought the card and they sent it in and they got it regraded, or what exactly happened with the collector that bought the card and sent it in. I hope that they maybe get some of their money back from this card, because it's been fake. So whoever they bought it from, wherever they bought it from, hopefully they bought it from somebody who, it's one of these exquisite RPAs, so it's not like it's not like a ho-hum random card that somebody bought. It's one of probably the most important cards within this hobby, so I would assume maybe they bought it from an auction house that would maybe hopefully they have their back. I'm not 100% sure where they bought it from, but shout out to them. And then obviously shout out to SGC, because they have come out with this statement. And my other point of this, the second point here that I think is so important, is the transparency and the statement that SGC put out. I think is as important as what has happened with this card, because we have seen over the past few years things that have been a little bit weird. We've seen things that have been a little bit out of the ordinary come in within sports cards, within different companies, within breakers, within a bunch of different things. We've seen very strange things happen, and then nothing. We hit radio silence from any of the companies, any of the people involved. It's just, business as usual. We move on, we move to the next thing, which within sports cards it's probably something that's very easy. It's probably very easy to just move on to the next thing, because within the sports card schedule, that's just easy to do, because there are, if something weird happens within some sort of product, just move on to the next product, just move on. Now, this is one of the biggest cards within the hobby, so maybe there's probably more of a light shed on what's going on here. I think both of these, like I said, the collector and then the SGC they did what was right for the hobby, which what's right for the hopy is not always, and this is what is right for the hobby is not what is always right for the bank account. Maybe, hopefully this person gets compensated. SGC, I think, has done a good job with, like I said, being transparent with what's going on. They graded the card. They said they realized that the patch was altered. They reached out to the person, they got it quickly fixed. Because if you're SGC, sure, I think the first point that I made is that we need industry experts to know these types of things. We need people who are the graders of these cards to, I guess, and it's easier said than done, 100%. I actually will even say that for sure. It's 100% easier said than done in this scenario where it's like, how would you even know it's altered unless, you have somebody who has like the immense knowledge of how much stuff goes on within this hobby. It's almost impossible. No, the fact that they were able to fix it so quickly also speaks to SGC's, I think, business model and what they've been able to create over the past few years. Now, like I said, I think industry experts, us, I think other people within the industry need to make sure that they're doing as much research as they can. Because, if you're a content creator, if you're somebody like me and us who have put out five episodes a week, 6 if you include the recap, which, 5 new episodes every single week, Monday through Friday, which we are coming up on 20,000 subscribers also, or 20,000 downloads also, which I want to give a big shout out to. Like, every time we come up on these milestones, it's almost like it's unbelievable. So I always want to give it a shout out to Danny, and I always want to give it a shout out to Mike Jokum, because, he was the original one that made sure he laid the groundwork of what this show was going to be. I came in, I did the show the way that I do my shows. Like when I was doing the Heroes for Sale podcast for a while, I just came in and I kind of did the thing, and Danny, he trusted me to do this thing. So, we're coming up on 20,000 downloads. Shout out to everybody who listens. But, industry experts need to do as much research as they can to make sure that they're putting out information that is correct, and that they're making sure that they're putting out information, for example, like this, that, led SGC to make sure that they could correct the issue that they had with this card because it was altered. I don't know. I think it leads up to every big company that's making these cards needs to have some sort of better log of the cards, if I'm going to be completely honest, because because sure, SGC should know that maybe there's an issue with this card and that maybe it was altered, but at the same time, it's like Upper Deck should have a photo library of every single card that's easily accessible to anybody who wants to look at it. I think that the farther you go up the chain, the more accountability there has to be within these card companies. If they're going to make cards like this, which, granted, Exquisite at the time, they didn't know what they were creating. Like, if you've ever listened to Carvin, Carvin was a guy on Clubhouse, or not on Clubhouse, but Carvin was not a guy on Clubhouse. He created this card, so I don't want to diminish what he did. Carvin was the person who worked at Upper Deck, who championed this idea and really got it to the finish line. He also created the cup, so he's one of the iconic voices within this hobby that I think maybe people don't know about potentially, that I think maybe should get more recognition in some scenarios. But he created these products with these companies, so I think the fact that we know, like, maybe there's products like Exquisite that are being created right now that we don't realize that are going to become Exquisite. But I think there has to be a way that these card companies come in and they create a database, or they create something where it's like they create something that helps grading companies, so they don't have to just assume, because like I said, they graded it and it looked fine. Like, I don't think that someone at the grading company said, no, I don't know, I don't really know about this card. Like, nobody, especially this card specifically, like if we're grading the LeBron Exquisite, there's no way this didn't go through multiple rounds of checks. Like, this is not just like like I said, the ho-hum random card. This is one of the biggest cards within the hobby. So, like I said, shout out to SGC for coming out and fixing this, because it would have been very easy for them to just sit on their laurels and be like, we didn't do anything wrong. Like, we graded this card in the way that we thought that we should have graded it. they didn't. They said that we made a mistake. We're coming out and we're saying that we're doing that. I think that shows a much higher level of accountability than, like, if I'm going to be honest, like, other companies within this hobby don't come out with full statements about issues that happen. So I think, I at least I hope that's what happens in the future with, companies and cards in general. If there are mistakes that are being made,